Technology Tuesdays. Hi, welcome to the Froggy Five. I'm your host, Jim Froehlich, founder and managing partner of the Froggy Companies. And today I'm happy to be joined by Jonny Cattani from Sunrise Investment Capital. So what I want to ask you about within the context of all the stuff you've done, because I know you've been in oil, gas, like you said, stockbroker, and now in your current position, Sunrise really has their act together on the technology side, I think. What on the technology front are you either utilizing that you can share, or like what excites you on the front end of technology in this world today?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're always looking for the next best thing, right? And obviously with, AI and automations and more of those things coming out, starting to explore some of that stuff, how we can just be more efficient, right? I mean, if you can have, some piece of software that, can even reduce your workload by 5-10%, right? That can be, compounding and exponential, much like, like any other return, right? Even, a financial return. So it's the same concept. We're always looking at new things. Now, currently, obviously, we use like CRM, those kinds of things. Starting to explore some other things in terms of, whether it be outbound dialing or, there's still things that work, right? We still use social media, paid ads, right? They still work amazing. That's how, I would say majority of our leads come in. I would say between that and Kevin's podcast are probably the majority of the ways that leads come in. So we're always exploring. The biggest thing kind of industry wide that I wouldn't say we're necessarily exploring, but, Brian's open-minded, which is one thing that I appreciate so much about him, is, eventually being on the blockchain potentially, right? And having some sort of, either bifurcated fund or, completely on the blockchain in a sense of, taking what is inherently an illiquid investment, right, in real estate, but more specifically syndications and funds, right, where you have kind of your 3, 5, 7, 10 plus year hold periods, and making it a more liquid investment by, putting it on the blockchain and, allowing, investors essentially to trade their equity. I'm not going to say freely, but more freely, right? Essentially having a market for that. Now, that's still all very early stages, even just as a whole, right? You really don't see any syndications. You're starting to see some of it, some of the smaller things. But I would say that's probably the biggest thing that I eventually see in industry-wide as a whole. Now, is that 5 years away? Is that 10 years away? I tend to lean more closer to probably 10 years. But as the new guard begins to take over in the industry, I think you'll start to see kind of an exponential increase in those kinds of things, over the next few years for sure.
That makes sense. Yeah. And it's interesting. You probably have an interesting perspective from your securities license and your background, and looking at this potential of the things that are pro about real estate. Being illiquid is often a pro. You can't just grab the money, right? The fact that you can do it with a public REIT may be, in my opinion, the reason why public REITs are now following the stocks when they go up and down, right? Where they used to be, you diversify into a public REIT. So that sort of, I know there's some liquidity pools, secondary markets, and then after you're in for a year, you can exchange. I am an investor in a few of the digitizing token blockchain companies and consult with a few, but I really only dug deep in the last year plus, because in my mind, it was all like blockchain and crypto stuff I didn't want to deal with, right? But this area, like you just alluded to, I think it could become something big, and for better or worse, we'll see how that liquidity pools have an effect on syndication. That's why I'm a little bit interested in.
And I completely agree, right? Kind of from the compliance standpoint, how that will work, because obviously, even though we're in the private sector, still SEC oversight, right? It is a private placement, at least at Sunrise. So ultimately, you do have that oversight, a lot of compliance, right? There's a lot of rules you have to follow. I'm no longer licensed, which I'm actually grateful for, because being licensed in the private sector has even more oversight, that goes along with it. So it will be interesting to see. And I know there's a lot of people, I'm sure you and I know some of the same people working, and really digging into the tokenization and that technology and how, it can be used here. And I do believe eventually we'll get that way, but I'm not necessarily a huge believer if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Because we've never progressed. But
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to certain things, like especially when you're dealing with other people's money, which obviously we are, there's kind of that you gotta, like, okay, if the whole industry goes this direction, obviously we'll follow. But until then, we're going to stick with what we know, and
Absolutely.
we've got a great track record doing it, so we're
You don't
happy
want to be
about
a
it.
pioneer. The first thing I learned in real estate is you don't want to be a pioneer.
Yeah,
Necessarily.
yes.
It sounds good,
Yeah.
but
There's not very often you reinvent the wheel in this industry. You know what I mean? Like that's why I like it so much, because there's really a playlist, and if you follow the playlist, it's like, well, here's what happens. It tends to work.
hey, thanks for having me on. If anybody else wants to find out more about what we're doing, please come to froggycompanies.com. Check out our 3 different business areas. We also have the Froggy Fund 1 that's now open for up to $18 million. We're going to be investing that $18 million across a diverse number of assets, cash flowing and ground up. And I'm really excited about this fund, and really confident that we can outperform most of the other people out there in terms of what we invest in and how we do our due diligence and the type of partners we put together. So it's great talking to you, and see you next time.